Welcome to the art of ancient Mesopotamia and Persia. Here we're going to see some new things start to happen. Let's move on here. All right, this is sort of the area we're talking about. The Mesopotamia is the large area between the Euphrates and Tigris. And this area, this time period we're talking about is about the year 3500 BCE in this part of the world, and going to about 500 BCE, before the year 0. These kingdoms were fought over and ruled by many different rulers and different tribes, from the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians, the Hittites, and the Akkadians, with often new rebirths of old kingdoms like Neo-Babylonia and Neo-Sumeria. So this is a very complicated and complex time period, okay? So let's take a look at some of their art and accomplishments. The role of the king and the power of the king is going to be really established in this time period and this area, which is different than what had been happening before with those early Neolithic cities and villages. Let's start with Sumeria and the Sumerians. They are going to invent not only irrigation and canal systems, but the first true written form of language. Even not hieroglyphics as you would think in ancient Egypt. That's really considered a picture language. Cuneiform, that's how that word is pronounced, which means wedge-shaped. It's actually a written symbol, so it's a written language. It's considered to be the first language ever. These were polytheistic, meaning multi-god, all of them, kingdoms and belief systems that were part of that, okay? This is what cuneiform looks like. And you can see the wedges that are symbolized here. This is a temple from ancient Sumeria in Mesopotamia area in Iraq. And it's called a ziggurat. That's the temple name. That's the way it's constructed. Okay, it's a ziggurat as opposed to a pyramid or a mausoleum or a cathedral. It's just the term for this type of temple. It's got sort of a stepped, like stepping stone, sort of like a stepped sort of formation. It's considered a load-bearing construction method used here. We're going to talk about load-bearing construction more when we talk about ancient Egypt. But think of that as sort of using the biggest base of material at the bottom and progressively going smaller and smaller as you work your way up towards the top. And of course, the higher you are, the closer you are to heaven. We're going to see this here. We're going to see this in Egypt. We're going to see this definitely in Catholicism later on during the Middle Ages and the Gothic. Here it is. This is a group of figurines, 12 of them, called the Tel Asmar Horde. It's sort of like, they don't mean like a horde like a mass of people. They're talking about like a horde, like a cache or cache of found items, like a treasure, okay? These are actual people. The tallest one is 30 inches high, and they go smaller from there. And they're not gods. They're actually meant to be more like stand-ins, okay? They are really meant to be real people that are standing in for the real people, the supplicants. And they've got their hands clasped. And really those hands are offering to a god, where they've been buried, offerings, libations usually of some sort, okay? Sort of offering to the god, all right? And their large eyes that you see here are meant to sort of represent a watchfulness or wakefulness, like they're always watching for the god, so that they'll be at his or her pleasure and offering them something. Okay? There were other groups of these figurines found buried in burial sites. Some have inscriptions of the name of the person that they're sort of standing in for, and what God they are being the prayerful towards. They've got cone-like simple forms in the body and like tubes for the arms. The men have the long curled hair and beards with skirts. The women have the unclothed one half shoulder. That's what their costume would have looked like in real life. They are eternally wakeful, awake, in service and in deprecation, in sort of a humbleness in front of the God they're trying to offer and make offerings to. Okay? But they're really stand-ins. Okay? This is a piece, it's a sculpture, and they're not sure whether if it stood on like a big large pole or was actually just set aside in a throne room. But this is called the Standard of Ur. This has what we call, for the first time in art, the Mesopotamia area really uses hierarchical scale. That's how that word is pronounced, hierarchical scale. That means the thing either that's the largest and or at the top physically of an artwork is the most important. You're going to see this in a lot of art forms. And this is telling a story on these three levels here, starting from the bottom and going towards the top. This is the war side of this sculpture. And if you look on the other side of the sculpture, it's the peace side, okay? Now, from the bottom, we've got the battle scene, and in the middle, we've got the vanquished being slaughtered, and in the middle, in the top section, we've got the king being, shown the prisoners, and they're being marched off, okay? The king is obviously the middle one in the middle top section, and he's also the largest figure in the group. On the opposite side, I think I've got a picture of it, is the peace side, okay? And at the bottom, we see the people bringing in the goods, the spoils of war, and bringing them through the town, along with the captured. And at the very top, we have the king again seated. He's the largest figure off to the sort of on the left, with his court and retinue, and he's getting ready to dispense the spoils and victory that he's won to the people, not just the royal court, but to everyone. So it's sort of the good and bad government. Good government, is not only vanquishes his foes, but he also brings the prosperity back to his people. This piece is inlaid, this sculpture piece, with mother of pearl and different types of coral, as well as something very precious called lapis lazuli. Lapis lazuli is that blue colored stone that you see inlaid here, and it's native to the Afghanistan area. And in art, at this time period, blue as a color in art, for like paint and things like that, is extremely rare. Therefore, lapis lazuli was prized. And really, when you're seeing it this much in a sculpture or any type of like jewelry or ornament, the king is saying, we are so wealthy, we can afford to show this much blue lapis lazuli in this our throne room. It's a show of royal power and wealth. This is actually on the side of a harp, like a musical harp. And at the very top, you'll see this man. Well, he's got two bulls on either side of him. Okay, he was buried in a grave. Okay, and that is called heraldic composition, where there's a main figure, but two mirror image figures that surround that main figure. That's called heraldic. Okay, so that makes that person in the middle seem much more important. Okay. This is the victory stele of Naram Sin, and he's an Akkadian king. Now here we have hierarchical scale, but on a slightly different skew here, okay? He, at the very bottom, he has vanquished this tribe, I think called the Lulubai, anyway, and he's won a victory. And he's marching on a diagonal. This is the first time we actually see hierarchical scale on a diagonal slant, going up towards the heaven. And he's obviously the largest figure in the sculpture, this relief sculpture here, with the horns on the side of his helmet. When you see horns, usually in art before this time, that denoted a god. And so for Naram Sin to be wearing a crown made with horns, or adorned with horns, that shows that he's showing his divinity, or his linkage at least, to divine power as he scales towards the heavens and majesty. That's what those stars or the suns are at the very top there. He is on his way to victory and God and his divine power. Now we're going to talk about the Stele of Hammurabi, which is what this is, a small portion of it. It's a sculpture, and it's actually in the round. You can walk around it. This is just the front top portion of it. This is not the first set of laws ever found written down, but it's the most complete. Hammurabi was a Babylonian king, and we see him standing here in front of the great god of the Babylonians, Shamash. Shamash is sitting on his throne, and he is handing over to Hammurabi a scepter or a rod and staff, which are symbols of power. Now, Shamash is the god of wisdom, knowledge, light, justice. He's giving over to Hammurabi these things, these tools and symbols of divine power, so that Hammurabi can write down these 300 laws that everyone will have to follow, which is unheard of. Here, laws where somebody actually has to, everyone, no matter where they are in the social order of things, has to follow. And it legitimizes Hammurabi's ability to enforce these laws, because he's got the blessing, so to speak, of Shamash. He's actually saying, I've been given the right to give you these laws by the God himself. And I've got the rights to prove it. And not only that, I've got so much power, and, well, I'm on such an equal par with the God, I can actually stand in front of him and look him in the eye. He stands in front of Shamash in this picture and looks at him as almost an equal as he receives these divine gifts. There's the full sculpture. And those inscriptions, those are the 300 laws that we see. This is the Ishtar Gate from Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar, who also supposedly has built one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world that nobody knows really existed or not, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. This was a tower gate that's quite beautiful. And of course, we've got the blue. Here's the possible recreation of what the Hanging Gardens of Babylon look like according to myth. The Assyrians also gave us something unusual artistically. This is called a lamassu. And that's this figure here that stood in front of city gates and palaces, temple complexes, etc. It's a relief sculpture that's meant to be viewed not only from the side, but from the front. Here, it's a man's head with the crown with horns, again, power, winged on the top of a body of a winged either lion or bull. And it was meant to scare off or threaten or at least intimidate their foes, but also to show kingly power. But what's unusual about these lamassu is that from the front, you see the two legs when you're coming like through the gate. But when you go by the side, you look at the lamassu from the side, it looks like the animal is actually walking. But when you see it 3/4 like this, the lamassu looks like it has 5 legs. That's simply the artist using an artistic license so that when you look at it from one side, it's got 4 legs, and from the front side, it's got 2. But unfortunately, that meant that from this viewpoint, it's got 5.